separately is something that might be a skill that others don't have. What else? Do you remember?
Titus 2.
Yes. Okay. The description. And actually, Timothy and Titus end up being kind of paradigms in a way. Now, I know they were evangelists, but also it discusses their roles as teachers. And doctrine isn't, our English fancy religious word for that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Others. Be not many of you teachers. That's James. Women are restricted from some role of some kind. It seems to indicate authority in 1 Timothy 2. All right. Thank you for doing that quiz. I hope it helped. I'm going to remind you the goals just because this is, I feel strongly enough about this. I want you to believe that as a teacher you have an authority role. And you know, that ought not to make you feel important. It ought to make you humble and fearful. Because you're a servant in what you do, but you've got to exercise the control and the delegated authority that you have to help people. And that helping them, you know, should. Also, remember what we're trying to do is take the clear Bible teaching and match it to what the students need in best class that you're teaching this year. Side comment, footnote. That's a little bit of a problem I have with pre-prepared material. I know there's some really good stuff, workbooks that you might go through. Who are those aimed at? Your high school class and the problems they're wrestling with in 2025 in the neighborhood and the culture that you have here? Well, maybe. Probably not very accurate. You understand what I mean? And our philosophy, really since it began, was always to develop our own material. Now, you can take the workbook you used last time if you want, think it through, modify it, whatever. If you go to our website, you'll see hundreds of them. There's good and bad. You can use any of it for free. The bad is people think, oh, this is all my work done for me. You know what I mean? That's not it either, right? You want to really think for each class, as to what is the needs of the students and how can I match the Bible teaching. And Marty, you're lecturing too much. It's the beginning of the class period. You're setting a tone that all they need to do is listen today. There's a lot of work. Come on, get over that. Last one, a lot of activities. We'll talk about that today. Here are the objectives. You might recognize that quiz I just gave you, guess what? It's right from the objective. So if you were able to do that, does that mean you were successful or I was successful? I guess you could say it's both. But I like to tell the class, if you can't pass the quiz and these objectives, accomplish these objectives, guess who took responsibility to make that happen? It was me. I needed a different exercise. I needed more reinforcement. I needed more feedback. Somehow or another, I'll take the blame for that. And but anyway, there. So we've gotten 1 through 5. You demonstrated you can measure, recognize them. So here's what we're going to now. I'm just for the next 20 minutes. I'm just going to go through a sequence of preparation steps for teaching adult class. Many of you are very mature Bible students, and I'm intimidated by that. A lot of this is for that workshop where we've got beginning teachers say, here's some study techniques. Here's just an approach to understanding. And I will try to do some of this for you with regard to 2 Timothy chapter 2. We'll pretend we've spent hours doing this, and here's the result we came up with. So we'll try to do that. Then the next session, we'll talk about these others. And these are more just miscellaneous topics about a Bible class, techniques, suggestions, take them as how you have one. But this is where we're headed. And these are all the objectives that we have for today. This I forgot to say last night. If you hadn't done it, this was what I was hoping you would do. So let's just take a minute. I wanted you to pick out a class, age, and maybe if you have particular names of people that you know, their faces in your head, who are they? Think about them. And that was the idea. And so I maybe could stop and maybe go through that. Who has picked a class already? Somebody? Yes. All right, Matt. What is your target age group?
I said letter E on page 1, co-ed, junior high class, or middle school.
Okay, so that's like 7th and 9th grade, boys and girls together.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not going to do this with everybody, but just for fun, let's keep on going. What's their general Bible knowledge? And I don't even know how you define that, but I mean, can you think of maybe holes in their knowledge or what's good or what's bad about it?
Do you want me to tell you what I have?
Yeah.
Decent idea of principles, minimal familiarity with different books and messages of the
Okay.
books.
All right. That might not be true at every church, but it could be, this group we have, they didn't really, general Bible knowledge. And do they know the material to be taught? In this case, it's 2 Timothy chapter 2. That's a lesson change.
I would
Okay, probably not.
not familiar with it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about this last night, maybe on the side, but how can you know that? I think a pre-quiz is not a bad idea if you don't know the group very well. And I think it works in an adult class if they don't run out of the class and never come back. If they will stay in there and you can collect it, it doesn't have to be their names on it, but if you've got a little assessment, just simple matching, something that's quick to do, true, whatever. I like to do that with Proverbs, true, false, and I'll put, is this true or false, and put Proverbs that sound pretty good by human wisdom, but that's not in there, and so we kind of work with that. But you can give a pre-quiz there. Mason, what's your group?
Middle school, unfortunately.
Oh, okay, co-ed?
Yeah.
All right, anybody else pick another group?
Adult.
Ron, what do you,
Adult was my
in an auditorium or a side?
auditorium class.
Okay.
That's
You
where I-
understand, I put 3 choices there. Auditorium, which is, you notice the skull and crossbones beside that?
Yeah.
Yeah. A side study, which would be a smaller group like this, where you probably have more serious Bible students, you'd have opportunity to kind of do more interactive exercises. And then I think a home study would be even different from that, where you could go an hour and a half. It's a small group, it's pretty serious. It could be a very serious, or evangelistic, you never know. But define it. That's my point. What do the people know? What are you trying to change about them as a result? Anybody else pick another group?
I just said adult with
Okay.
the crossbones.
Okay,
Because
you're in the,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
In the
do you
dates.
find, do you ever ask them to move forward, or do you ever change where they're sitting, kind of break their comfort zone, or just let them sit where they are? Because it's
Yeah.
sometimes difficult to get them to
Right.
respond.
thank you for that question. And I don't know how big of a picture you want. That little first exercise, we're saying, who is it, according to the Matthew account of the Great Commission, who are you teaching in these Bible classes in the church building of Christians?
Mostly mature often.
They're disciples, right? And I'm
Yeah.
teaching them, they're disciples. What does that mean? It means that you would like to think they would put some effort into the whole enterprise. They would bring a pencil. Y'all remember the tribe that brought them?
I can never remember.
I know,
You
that's
ask
what I love
every
about
time I
that.
see you.
See, he knows the thing. Right. He remembers the question, but never the answer. I think that's the fun part about that one. All right, did you bring a pen? Look at this guy. He's armed for about it. Okay, maybe I'm getting back to this. I think it's probably correct, righteous maybe, is probably a better term in a Pharisaic sense, to say as a disciple, you probably should be willing to cooperate with the teacher in something as minor, but it doesn't happen.
No.
And, we changed our order of worship at Embry Hills where we have a assembly on Wednesday nights, and then the teachers are dismissed, we sing one more song, and then everybody's dismissed. Well, everybody's kind of, first of all, Wednesday night's not very dense as far as, and then all the kids leave, and then all the teachers leave, then all the adults leave to go to the classes that are not in the auditorium. And what you have is like,
Yeah, all over.
right, yeah, it's not even islands, it's almost like rocks, that are just spread out in the ocean. And so what I tried to do is when everybody's up moving around anyway, say, hey, since everybody's up, let's all move to the front. And some will and some won't.
One
So,
more question, Marty.
yeah.
So in every large group,
Yeah.
there's going to be maybe only 2 to 3 that aren't those disciples yet, or are new converts.
Yeah.
Out of the entire room of mature Christians.
Yeah.
So you find yourself wondering
Yeah.
about those 2 or 3,
Mhm.
versus others that are nodding and, et cetera.
So, there's so much. Yeah, I have later, we're going to talk about different techniques and the downs and the upsides. I'll just jump ahead a little bit and say, if you actually paired up some of those people with some of the mature people who probably already know what you're teaching anyway, maybe, and you had them in a little bit of a group exercise, they might feel more comfortable. You know what I mean? It might have somebody who on an individual basis. For example, that exercise I showed you where we were summarizing chapter content in Peter. Oh, that's our first, it's Sunday morning. I mean, we have walk-in visitors just off,
Sure.
kind of off the street.
Yeah.
But they're surrounded by 2 or 3 Christians, make them feel comfortable, you know what I mean? They don't have to do all the work. They actually maybe don't do any of it. They just listen in that discussion. I just think there's a great value in that kind of way of welcome, and other techniques too.
I like the view I'm getting from this talk here, because the class should be active, especially in a tour, active in trying to bring everyone up to the same level of understanding and comfort and someone being there. And maybe, and that's a great step to take, you know.
I'll mention another technique. I'm way in the next lesson right now. I mean, the next module, talking about various techniques. You may have noticed some we've used here. It's something that I've done. Daniel, my youngest, he uses this all the time. He's really good at it. It's called, and I didn't know what it was called, but I had a high school teacher in my class. He said, "Yeah, that's just called. I think it's think, pair, share." Is that right? Think, pair, share. Have you heard that before? I hadn't. But that's what we're doing. Okay, I want everybody to take 30 seconds and just write down 3 things that blah, blah, blah. Right now, get to the person nearest to you and you exchange answers. Talk to each other about that. You understand what I mean? Then I'm going to go around and I'm going to just quickly pick 3 or 4 groups to let them share with the congregation. That can be done so fast, especially after the group is trained to do that. It doesn't really take, it may take twice as long as you just lecturing to say, but it's not that much. And this is an implicit point too. Y'all took the quiz pretty quick. I mean, there wasn't a lot of overhead with that, right? Well, it took some work. You had to duplicate it, had to have it on the tables. There's a lot of these things you can do that involve people like you're talking about. And also it gives me feedback too. How did y'all do on the quiz, right? I can actually watch. I wouldn't admit out, so I'm in the meta place here, but I can see, are they taking the quiz? I can walk around. I can see, are they filling it out? Are they kind of getting the right answers? There's a lot of implicit feedback that comes from those extras. Same thing with the group exercise or the think, pair, share or whatever. There's a lot of information I'm getting about, yeah, man, they forgot everything we talked about last night, or they kind of did maybe.
I was going to say, the technique I've used, I don't know how effectively it's been, but is to take all the people who will cooperate and have them move to the back of the building. Then bring your lectern back to the 5th or 6th row, or whatever. Right. Then they're all back against the back wall. They can't go back any further. But you come to them, and then it kind of gather everybody together. And
I mentioned this last night. It's later in the Peter class we did a similar group thing. I really needed everybody to work, and it was maybe 5 or 10 minute exercise. What I did beforehand is I went around and picked particular men. I'm saying this kind of as and I said, will you lead a group and be the spokesperson, keep them on task, fill out the form, report back at the end. And I picked, I didn't pick them from all over. I just picked the men I could trust to do that. And at one point I just said to Wayne Gaskin, I said, Wayne, the guys in the back are not going to move. Would you go back and be their leader? So I just sent the guy back there to do that. So that's another technique too. I do think that the congregation, not at first, but eventually will kind of get the hints on some of this. Some of them will actually move to the front or understand they need to sit by somebody, which isn't altogether unhealthy for others. All right. Sorry, we're way off topic. Maybe we've shortened the next module. Y'all throw me off my time, but we're going to talk about time management later. All right. So one more group. Somebody that didn't do auditorium adult. You might pick another group. Ooh, okay. Yeah, y'all are gluttons. I had to volunteer. I would not volunteer for that. By the way, I probably was deceptive yesterday. I said something about we have 5 side studies. What I meant by that was 5 classes going on that require, male 2 person. So I counted high school and junior high. Those require 2 men to teach it. So we also have 2 English studies and then a bilingual. If we had more classrooms, we'd have another. We normally would have 4 side studies for adults in addition to the high school and junior high, where men in pairs are teaching. I don't know if I left the wrong impression about that. I wish we had 5 side studies. I wish we could close the auditorium. I think if we did, we'd have people sitting there in the dark, for 45 minutes. What's that?
In the foyer.
Or waiting to keep them for the door. Conwood did that, They actually didn't open the doors. They didn't turn the lights on, but they did. They would have people sitting outside waiting for the church to open. All right. So I hope you've done that. If you haven't, you need to do it right now. And maybe stop listening to me and decide my class, because our project is this afternoon after lunch, and you may want to work through lunch, come back a little early. Maybe we'll aim for 1:30, depending on when we break. I want you to have this filled out. This is page 14. Go to page 14. And this is my, big objective for the whole weekend, and that is that you will have planned the class period, thought of a goal, thought of some learning objectives for the class period, listed some activities that you could use to accomplish those learning objectives, and then plan a schedule of how you might do that in the class period. Does that make sense? All right. And I know this is a template and all that. We're kind of learning our golf swing. You kind of got to get some kind of little pattern to do it. And later you maybe can do this without filling out a form every time, but in our workshop, that's our goal at the end, and we're going to share these with each other this afternoon. Okay, so you'll say, I'm teaching, I guess everybody's going to say adults, I'm teaching a high school class, it's only boys. Josh, that's kind of my favorite after the camps. If I just spend my life teaching, I'd want all guys, no girls, sorry, right, in a kind of mature high school age. I think their brains are working good. They're energetic. If they take it seriously, they're just. I believe you could have better students. But I'm prejudiced about that. So, all right. And then you might in these activities, down here you can say, and I don't have it now, but I might have this as a side tool, right? Maybe one of my themes is we're in training. We're athletes trying to be champions. Maybe bring in 1 Corinthians 9 or some of the other passages to deal with that. Hebrews 12, running a race. So what do we learn from that? And how, or I'm going to use an outline. It'll be pre-prepared or blank, and they will fill it out, or I'll review a map of how do we get here, or whatever. So think about some artifacts that might be part of that. I'm taking way too long here. Okay, so that'd be other products as well. And I'll talk about a lesson sheet, but I'm not going to require that today, but you can imagine. All right, these are some so I'm going to pretend we've decided on our students, and we're going to think about how to prepare. These are the products of the preparatory study, and I've given you these. They're in your book. I don't know. I should put the page numbers down. First of all, we've already learned the chapter summaries. Y'all remember this from last night? Let's just do it for fun. Chapter 1.
Initial charge.
Yeah, try to do it from memory. Initial chapter 2. Now we're into the 2s, remember?
Men and
2s,
women.
pairs. Men and women, 3.
Elders and
Elders and deacons, 4.
Women and others.
Widows and others. Good. Oh, sorry, wrong.
Oh,
All teachers tricked me. 5 is widows and others. 6,
rich and poor.
poor and rich. Right? Okay, 2 Timothy now, chapter 1. That's a harder one to remember. I don't have a good mnemonic device.
Hold on.
Hold on and
Not
Not
ashamed.
not ashamed. Good. Chapter 2,
Images.
Workers, images of workers.
images. That's our chapter, by the way, that we're teaching. I should put that in a different color. 3 is, remember, add 2 and 3, you get 5. Add
Parallel
1
times.
to 4. So
Perilous times.
perilous times in scripture. 4 is easy. Give me final charge. Okay. So just for the new guys, we try to learn this. It took us maybe 5 or 10 minutes. We use flashcards. Kind of seem juvenile, but actually it works. You can do something like that. Okay, now I want to talk about themes, and we'll discuss. In fact, let's look at page 8 and go through this page, and when I get to the themes, I'll talk about it. And I am very anxious to hear maybe study techniques you have used to prepare to teach a class that maybe I haven't really thought about. But I just want to go through these and suggest this is the method. Remember, this is material from a workshop that we'll do with guys they're early college, just out of college, they never taught an adult class on a regular basis. You guys are kind of good examples. Just maybe teaching their first adult class, giving them a template, an idea how to study and prepare. All right, so go through this list with me. The first thing, remember our flow chart from the Bible to the guy praying, what's in the text? We're teaching the Bible. We're not just teaching current events or what. So what's there? And so what would you do? You'd look at who are the characters mentioned, if it's a story, for example, or the events or the locations of the writing of the letter, the background details of the letter. So we tried to do some of that last night, although I did it in a terrible lecture form and everybody failed the quiz, right? But we could probably figure that out. 2 Timothy, second letter, after maybe a period of freedom for Paul and then second imprisonment near his death. I presume it's still related to the church at Ephesus, but really it's more personal to Timothy anyway. Those kind of things, all right? Keep on going. Note the appearance of themes. Okay, so here's one of the exercises we did. When I had the guys, we kind of did this as a group, but you can do it on your own. You go through and you're giving these 5-word titles to each of the sections of the book after you've kind of divided it up by transition words on it. And you start to notice, hey, this is like the 3rd time he's used a military image in Timothy, for example, right? Or how many different words in this book refer to the Bible? Truth, doctrine, sound doctrine, kind of a different word, you know what I mean? And so you thought, well, there's really key emphasis in this. And how many times do we have to go back and talk about these evil, false teachers and all the damage that they've done? Not only generally, but personally to Paul, it's done me much harm. And so out of that, you start to say, okay, I can see maybe 6, 7, 10 different themes, but then you start to narrow that down. So we did this in our workshop class, and we'll do it again, just kind of like as a study technique. And you start to think, oh, you know what? This military image finds expression from the very beginning, 1 Timothy. I was given this charge. I commit this to you, Timothy. And then it ends in chapter 4 of 2 Timothy with him saying, fulfill your ministry, right? I mean, it's kind of like, do your job, because I'm about to be offered and so on. So we decided that theme 1 that pervades the book is this idea, you have been given a job to do. Is that true for all Christians? Is it the same job to do for all Christians? I mean, save yourself, I suppose, but there's moms and there's dads and there's uncles and there's evangelists and there's elders and there's widows. Each one has a challenge, a commission. It's different, right? And it could be stop error or teach or preach or charge. These are things mentioned to Timothy, right? And each one of those has a responsibility. It requires courage and commitment. That's the thing that comes out. Suffering and hardship is going to be expected. That's the way it is. You've been given a milk. So can you see that as a theme throughout both of these books, 1st, 2nd Timothy, if you're familiar with the books, right? But already, are you thinking about a goal, a life-changing goal for particular students in your class when you see that? I know this is Timothy, right? But you see how that might map into something like, who are you? What is your commission as a mom of preschoolers? And what are your goals for these kids, right? What are you doing to discipline yourself to accomplish those things? Think about that. So you kind of see how we're ooching over into life-changing goals, all right? Here's another thing. The word, truth, faith, scripture, gospel, doctrine, it shows up through all of it. And almost every time Paul addresses something, it kind of comes back to, well, the sound doctrine is the answer. Hold the things you've learned since you were a kid. Remember who you learned. All of that keeps coming back to the word. So the idea is there's an emphasis on knowing and teaching and handling the right and all of that, as well as running away from the stuff that causes divisions or that's confusing or has no profit. These are themes that you see how you would discover these. It might take a long time, maybe take some discussion, but as a teacher, you would discover it. And theme 3, I'm trying to convince you, but I'm just saying this is just an output of one. Another year we had 4, and they're similar but different for me. The other theme that struck me, it took me a while to kind of see this, is how much evil Paul mentions in the 2 letters. And I don't just mean like he lists all the lawbreakers that need the law in the first chapter of First Timothy. But I just mean people that are mean to him or abandoned him, right? Or false teachers that did damage to the faith of others. Or, in fact, he says, evil men will grow worse and worse, right? Chapter 3, 2 Timothy. And then remember our two passages that add up to 5. 1 Timothy 4, all the terrible doctrines. 2 Timothy 3, perilous times, and he lists all the evil that's going to be in the world. Okay, I think one thing would be expect evil, and you should see it in false teaching. It's possible in all relationships, Demas even. Money, friends, religious people in the world, it's everywhere. It requires defensive and offensive actions. And then the answer, of course, is but you abide in the things which you've learned, for example, meaning that you're going to stick with what you learned, knowing from whom you've learned it, and so on. Remembering is a key theme. All right, y'all got that? Can you accept those 3 themes? Let's assume we spent hours coming up with this, right? But that's what we came up with. You might have others, but that's what we came up with. So those are the themes. Fulfill your commission, hold to the word, and expect evil. That doesn't mean that every point in every lesson has to be tied to one of those. But I do think when we pick up 2 Timothy 2 and say, okay, elders said you got to teach this in the high school class. I think you want to say, well, which of these themes are the strongest and loudest in here that I can reinforce from this passage? And just right now, I haven't showed you, I hope you read 2 Timothy too much. Can you think of some of the things that show up in that chapter that kind of might help reinforce these themes or bring more information? What do you think?
The images you talked about?
They're looking sleepy, Marty. You've just been talking way too much. You depended on the PowerPoint. This would have been better if they could have discovered those somehow instead of having you tell them.
He begins talking, he says, suffer hardship with me as a good soldier. So that sounds
It
like,
begins that way. It sounds like a commission, doesn't it? Yeah.
also a little bit of expecting evil. If he's saying you're going to suffer, get ready for it.
Yes, right. And there's actually some names of some evil people in the chapter. Other points from the chapter. I don't know, maybe you may want to open your Bible to 2 Timothy 2. But yes, Ron.
Yeah, the King James, study to show yourself approved. You have a challenge here to put yourself to work.
And an emphasis, I think, on that,
Yeah.
handling it right, the word. So in the sense that, this is your tool. This is your sword. This is your whatever. So whatever you're going to do to handle this evil, it's going to be related to this. Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you think about it, it's not hard to map a whole lot of what a vessel for honor. I think that could loosely fit that you've been given a job to do. Qualify yourself for that by purity, by a life example, right? And you're fighting evil. We talked about this last night. These people are not your enemies. They've been taken captive by the enemy, right? Their brains are not working right. How's the answer? What's the answer? Well, okay, Ralph.
Is your suggestion here, in we're teaching 2 Timothy 2,
Yes.
that we pick one of those and focus on what we see in that chapter with one theme? Or are you saying, take the book and tie it to look at all the things we're doing in one class
It's a
period?
great question. I'll try to articulate what I'm saying. What I guess I'm saying is way back at the course level, which by the way, I'm going to derive some goals about the whole course, change your life, all that, sure. I will have set these out. I think when I look at them in a particular text, I'm going to teach chapter 2. I don't think I would necessarily pick just one. Now, it may be that one is just like so dominant that that's what you would do. But I would decide in the lesson, this will be dominant. I'll have an opportunity to reinforce this one. I mean, the answer is all of the above, any of the above, as it suits the group and their needs and the changes in their life you want to make. In this chapter, I mean, the only reason I picked it is it kind of is all three. But I think it's nice to stop and say, in fact, I can imagine an exercise. Guys, remember our themes? We set them in the first class period. Take 3 minutes, work together, find these themes in this text. Okay, what am I accomplishing in that exercise? Well, review the themes, look at the text. They have to actually read the words of the text. Some level of synthesis and meaning and pulling the themes out of that. It's a great question. I just think guys are studying. I mean, if we were studying the historical life of Timothy and practices in the early church, I probably wouldn't do any of this. I'd be looking for other stuff, that's in here.
I was gonna ask, are these themes that you picked out as the teacher beforehand? Or
Yes,
these
yes,
themes that you
yes.
called out from the class the first?
Yes, the first thing you said.
Okay.
So here, what I'm doing in page 8, I feel like I'm not very organized. Sorry, I know. Don't tell me I know. I'm on page 8, and I'm just recommending that as a teacher, way back a month before, because of course the elders gave you lots of warning before you had to teach the class. Right? I would go through these steps. And how do you begin? Well, read the text. That's probably the first step, right? Not too hard. But then keep reading it, and I'm looking for things, repeated words, repeated themes. And after several weeks, or maybe, I don't know, discussion with people, these are like the products you come up with. But that's long before you've begun the course. But I would say this, the very first thing you'll cover in the course is, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to change your life, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to see some cool stuff in these 2 books about these themes, if that's what I'm getting. Yes, good question. Yeah, no, this is way before teaching. But the first thing is study the text, obviously, and one of that is I'm looking for themes. And the more you think about it and think about lessons and class activities, you may modify that. I mean, obviously, that man, how could I miss that? And you add one more or something. Okay, then I think after you got the text pretty well down, you've even started to think about the themes and what goals might be. Oh, I should finish the chart. Okay, so how can I write a course goal that relates to these themes that are out of the book? I wonder if I can do that. And by the way, it may not be one-to-one correspondence, maybe multiple, but can you think of a goal? Remember,
For each one individually or
could
for
be
an
that.
overall?
Could be one, but support these that were built on these themes. I don't know if I should try to do this real time or not, but I mean, I'll just tell you in the workshop, we came up with probably 10 or 12 of those. And they said, well, this one and that one, they're the same, or this one and that one, you could consolidate or something, so you keep massaging. This is one workshop. I have another set for a different workshop, but here's an example. I want everybody in here to understand who you are. You're a college student. You're the son of this father and mother. You're a member of this church. In those roles, you have an accountability to fulfill some duties. Write down those duties. Figure out how to be better at them. That's the change in life I want you to see. Timothy was given a tough job. I always wonder, why did Paul run away? He said, for this reason I left you in Ephesus to charge certain men not to teach false doctrine. Well, Paul, why didn't you just stay and help me with that? Right? He just ran off and left me. A tough job. But Timothy knew what he had to do. That was one of the things that was difficult. But anyway, so we're going to do that. So there might be exercises you can imagine as you go through where you begin to identify what are your roles? What are the goals you have in those roles to accomplish something? How could you be better at that? Do you see that as a life-changing goal? Does it match the message of 1st, 2nd Timothy? I think so. Maybe as a way of applying. Here's another one. You know what? I really need to master the word. I need to increase my study skills, maybe my library, the opportunities I'm taking to learn more from experts, just my simple discipline of reading, and so on. So that's another goal of life I think we want to come out with. Expect evil and respond to it in all aspects of our life. I think sometimes we're shocked that there's something goes wrong in our life. No, that's the ordinary thing.
Amen.
Right, Ron? And somehow we're surprised by that. No. We should be ready, expecting it, actually. Both betrayal by others and sadness and messing up on our own, all by our own selves, messing things up and having to recover from that. And figure out how not to be as discouraged and have a wisdom rooted about it. I hope that's a good life change. And so that, of course, relates to the word as well. And then this one, the class came up with, I hadn't really thought about it, but it's in this chapter, teach men who can teach others also, right? I think maybe there's a place, depending on the group, if it's kids, maybe not so much, but if it's adults, if you're dealing with parents, you know what? What is Paul doing for Timothy in both of these letters? What's he doing? What's the whole point of it? And he's telling Timothy to do the same thing. I think maybe a theme that becomes a goal is let's think of ways we can prepare others for the for the future. How? Well, teaching them the word, setting an example and all that. Can you see how, now this is maybe hours of work, but I'm just telling you, this would be, you see how this would guide, like when we looked, I'm sorry, I'm so disorganized, sorry. When we looked at qualification, we looked at those 25 verses with one specific kind of thing in mind. We learned a lot from that. And so you might actually think of looking at First Activity with this kind of a filter. If this is what you think is needed for your students to change them, this could be a filter really that, yeah. I mean, we could get into whether women were deacons or not. You know what I mean? Is that gonna help us with this goal? I'll talk to you about it after class if you want. That's what I would say, right? But this is where I'm going. And I know it's fun to talk about controversies and false doctrine and silly things people have said about this. And we've got to bash the Calvinists and the compulsory exercises against institutionalism. We've got to study. Y'all know what I mean. No, I'm trying to change lives. And that's what I'm, okay. Y'all see that, all right?
You don't want to disregard those things.
Well, you know what? I have 45 minutes. I don't want to disregard them, but it may not be the best setting if I'm trying to change a life to take time out of that precious few minutes to stop and deal with that.
So do you have another class to do that?
If that's your goal, for sure. Yeah, if our goal is, I often wonder when we stop and say, that by grace you're saved through faith, that none of yourself. We always have to stop, and what do we have to say? Well, it's not faith only, And I look out across the room and I think, how many of you people are wrestling with that right now? You know what I mean? In your audience, how many people are kind of confused about faith only doctrine? My experience, I'm sorry, is I don't think many people are. And not only that, I'm not sure that's the setting I'm going to convince somebody who happens to be visiting from the Baptist church that, that's a false teaching. Y'all know what I mean by that. I know this is heresy, but I think we have this idea that they're just compulsories. If you cover this verse, you've got to cover the false teaching that's associated with it. You know what I mean? I wonder if we're really using if I'm preaching a sermon, I'm pretty terrible budgeting my time, but I want every minute to be aimed toward that point I'm trying to make in that sermon. I don't understand why Bible classes are not the same way. But, colleague, I'll have a sermon on that. You know what I mean? If I think that's a problem, or we'll have a whole class on certain false teachings, and I'll actually maybe try to invite the people that will benefit most from that. Those who are trying to teach their neighbors, or those who maybe have come from a denominational background or something like that. I know this is puzzling, but when I look at the New Testament sermons that are recorded and Jesus teaching, did he get distracted by questions that were kind of like,
Ask my brother to divide the inheritance.
right, or whose husband is she? In the resurrection. You know what I mean? Of course, those were ill-intended questions, but I'm just saying it's often the case that Jesus answers the question that they should have asked, rather than the one that they kind of. Well, anyway, I'm sorry. Y'all can disagree with me on that. I know that's kind of a little bit counter, but I think we lose a lot of valuable time. But anyway, I see some nods, maybe in both directions from you. But think about it.
I'm not disagreeing with you,
I know.
but there has to be a point at which these young people are prepared
Oh,
to
absolutely.
deal with that
Right.
when it's out here, and they may not know it.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think as an eldership, long before you ask this knucklehead, newbie teacher to teach this class on 2 Timothy 2, you've made another decision, which is what are the high school kids wrestling with in their life? What false teachings are they hearing and they maybe have not equipped to answer those things? And maybe you decide, no, we're going to postpone the Timothy class and we're going to try to deal with some of these questions that we have, identify them, get to know the students. Is this an issue? How much do you know about this already? You know what I mean? And then kind of, so that's it. As pastors feeding the flock, that's the goal, is to give them what they need. But focus on that, right? When you're doing the class. So, yeah, I agree with
I
everything.
didn't mean to distract.
No, that's okay. No, that's good.
I just wanted to ask, while you're saying you may get to this, pre-preparation
Yeah.
for all of this that you're describing for us, as we lay the class out, How are you doing that? Do you have the teachers before they teach? Do you actually give them time to work together, or do you ask them to do that privately to prepare the class? How do you?
Okay,
I've heard of congregations having actual training
yes.
for their teachers prior to them teaching that class. Not training, but
No, that's,
putting
So-
their material together.
yes, in a workshop like this, and like I say, some places where I've done this. So what we have is we have 13 lessons right here. And those 13 lessons are divided in just 6 lessons with me kind of saying all this stuff. Defining goals, objectives, thinking about class activities, defining a template for a handout, those kind of things, which I'm gonna do quickly in the next few, couple hours. We'll have 6 lessons for that. And then the remaining lessons are dry runs for the class that is going to be taught in the next segment, which is 13 lessons of actual, live adults come in and study. I think it's a cool thing anytime there's maybe especially a new course being developed, if the 3 or 4 men who are going to teach it or 2 or 1 could actually meet, and we don't do that. The idea is that these are kind of half time, what do you call it? Double time, quick summaries. They show these are my objectives, these are my activities, there's my class schedule, and these are the handouts that I'm going to use, or drafts of them at least, right? So every one of these guys in the class, there are usually maybe 11 teachers. I'll usually teach the first and the last class period, but and get critiqued, by the way, which isn't hard. But anyway, each of those guys, we'll take a half a class period and say, this is what I'm going to teach in that lesson. And so it's a chance for us to say, well, you didn't cover this, or you'll never finish that in 45 minutes, or whatever we're going to say. And so they can work on it. And if they're good enough to have done some drafts of their handouts, the lesson assignment sheets, maybe a quiz, maybe an in-class exercise, we can kind of go over that and say, well, here's the problem you're going to have with that, that kind of thing. Then, once they teach, what we do is on a Wednesday night after services, we'll take a couple of them and then meet in a classroom after church and say, well, how'd it go? And smart aleck me, I will have graphed their scheduled accomplishment against their actual, I'll show you a graph of that in a minute. So you can see where they got behind and what took longer than they thought and that kind of thing. So that's what we do there. But that's for the novice. I mean, this is a training class for people who've never taught an adult class before. That's the structure we have at Embry Hills. I'm just telling you for that. But we don't do this for every class we teach. I mean, the serious teachers, in theory,
You said you just every so many months or whatever you'll have.
yeah, every
a training for
3 or 4
teachers.
years we do this for all the new guys that moved in or
Sorry, I didn't mean to, I just wanted to see how you were
no, that's
bringing this about with Embry Hills with the teachers. That was
right. Am I leaving? Sorry, Marty. I think you're leaving the impression you're objecting to these questions. That's not. So what can I do? Thank you all so much for these questions. It's very helpful. It helps me know what the impression I'm leaving, and that I haven't made certain things clear. And by the way, Ron, I have done this workshop and left behind with Dustin Merkel or David Norfleet, and they will do this then after for a segment. They'll pick the 7 or 8 guys that ought to be teaching.
You had mentioned that before. I
Right,
just
right.
wasn't picturing
Yeah.
what you were saying, how that applied.
Yeah.
How that,
Well,
I understand a lot better now.
And right now, I'm over here. We start on the end of October. And I'm right now, Mason's giving me a list of, 13, 15 guys that I'm gonna write a letter to and say, hey, here's the plan. Are you interested? And I hope to get 11 or so out of that. We'll do that. All right, thanks. But now, we're all mature teachers. I don't need the workshop. Here's what I would do. If somebody said, okay, now you gotta teach Zechariah. I don't know,
Thanks.
yeah, right. Do I have to take 13 lessons? Yeah, you brought it
first
up.
question.
Can I do this in like one lesson summary? How? But anyway, I would study the text. That's number 1. I'm on page 8 in the book. And the way I would study it would be, I'll actually read it a bunch of times, but I would learn the facts. I'd look for themes. I would mark unclear phrases, terms, and questions that I have, some of which I may never get to. But as I'm going through, I'm thinking, okay, if I'm teaching this, what do I want the students to memorize? A learning objective, right? What do they need to know? Maybe the content of each chapter. I think you need to do that as a anytime you study and reinforce it. It's just a bigger content. You know, what are the 3 reasons for this or that, whatever. And then I'd start to list candidate goals. How am I trying to change the student's life? So I started over here with the word and what I could understand about it. But then I went to the end of the story and said, okay, now who am I teaching again? Oh, it's the side study, and they know their Bible pretty well, and you know, I can kind of think that one. All right. Number 2, I do additional research, and you guys know all the caveats about looking at a commentary or interlinear or things like that to answer some of these questions. And out of that, I might think, okay, you know, to really comprehend this, we're going to have to understand the word doctrine more clearly. That's going to be an objective. I want them to be able to kind of really do a deep explanation because that's key to understanding the book. I'm making all this stuff up. So number 3, I draft a list of goals. That's life changes. Then I start a list of factual objectives. That's going to iterate a lot as you go. Number 5, I would start for this particular chapter now. I'd start listing some factual and analysis questions that I might ask the students to prepare beforehand. We haven't talked about homework just yet, but one of the first things I want to do is think, what could they do on their own at home to make them better prepared factually to cover the lesson? What am I looking upon here? Y'all know what I'm talking about there. And you know that all Christians do all their homework assignments before every class. Right. So you got to think about that. And we will in a minute. I would think about some class period activities that will help me accomplish these learning objectives. You know, think, pair, share, group activities, a quiz, a matching, you know, a case study. I don't know, whatever you want to do. I'd start thinking about that. And then I'd probably prepare the handout, the lesson sheet. I would probably do the lesson, which I always find lots of typos in doing that. And then I would plan the class period. I have no idea why it's numbering 7 through 11 there. I think that word helped me out with that formatting there. It should just be A, B, C, D, E. I'm on number 8, on page 8. And then as I'm, I'd get everything ready. I'd make a time budget for each activity, sketch out the visual aids, maybe begin to make the handout of the PowerPoint. I'd prepare the handout. I'd make a contingency plan in case I ran out of time, you know. Especially, one of the constraints these guys have is they only get 1 class period. So they don't budget their time, they're out. You know, they can't finish next class period. So that, okay, and then finally I would do the practical preparation, printing, duplicating, distributing the homework sheet. More and more, for us, the preparation is set up a Dropbox or a Google file, or have the deacon of our website put all the material online so they can prepare even though they missed a class period. So that's one thing that we do. Make sure everything is online before the class starts if you can. You may not have all the lessons done, but just so if they didn't get a printout, they didn't come to service before, they missed a class, they can still be accountable to do the lesson, be prepared. We also, by the way, put the audio recordings of every class. They're digitally recorded. And so if you miss a class period, you can go listen to it, you can get the material, and get some sense of what was covered. So that, we're disciples. We make an effort, right? I'm in the course to change my life, and we need to make the tools available for the students to do that if they're.
That's an audio recording.
Yes, sir.
How does that work if I'm not able to be in class with your visually intensive lessons?
Well, I'm terrible about this. In theory, probably not at all in practice. You would post an update of the PowerPoints online, so you at least have the visuals. You have the lesson material. And what happens is our deacon of everything, but one of the many deacons we have, he has a little digital recorder. He runs to every class, turns it on, comes back after service, turns it off, cuts out the beginning and the ending, and then he puts that on the website. You can go to our website and find all that. The intent is, of course, to accommodate, coddle, the student, right? Make everything as easy as possible so they can participate and keep up. All right, let's take a break.
Oh, great.
I was gonna give you these tools. Yeah, so we also worked hard
Preempted
at step 2 in outlining the section. This would be a good working outline if you want to use this for your lesson that you're gonna prepare in chapter 2. Divide the whole chapter maybe into 2 parts. The first is strength and hardship, and of course it has the initial images, and then Paul and Jesus are examples here in 8 through 13. And then part B would be a diligent workman, and these are the subjects that you can use this or not. I think it's in your material back in the back somewhere. Yeah, page 21. I'm not sure the outline. Okay. Well, the themes and the goals are there on page 21, and some of the tools we use to get to that are on page 20 and 21.
Yeah, on the 23.
Thank you. Page 23. Right. Oh, you weren't supposed to find that page. But that's an example handout. We try to match this format, and that's actually an example of what you might do for chapter 2. I have an example of chapter 3, I think, in here somewhere, and some other activities. I think that's time for a break. Let's take a 2 minutes.
Can you leave us that previous one?
What's that?
Can you leave us the previous slide that had the outline?
Oh, yes.
It's in your books. Oh, is
Yeah, on page, that outline is used in the lesson sheet.
it? Okay, never mind. Got it. Okay, take another break. Never fails. Brother, how you doing? Yeah. Yeah. Had I only known.
We had something on the docket
Did you?
doing that first and then coming over. So
Understand, busy times. Good to be busy. Yeah.
lunchtime here. Today's my 50th high school reunion.
Oh, right. So are you going?
Yeah, the first one I've been to. I've been to I'll just leave at lunchtime.
Yeah, I had my 50th,
I love that.
I guess 3 years ago. I'm an old guy.
Really old.
I went all the way to California for mine. Been about 75. Got out of a class of almost 1,200. That's not very many.
But I think our class was about 70.
I was glad I went. I wouldn't go again. They're going to have another one at 55 or something. I wouldn't go all the way out there for that. I saw a couple of guys I hadn't seen in 30 years. And so it's kind of nice to see them and catch up. But
I mean, I'm going to know it. I probably only knew 50 out of the 700 anyway. Couple of times, I think it was 53 or so. I'm not really expecting to know many. I'm going to go and visit with people and catch up with them a little bit until we start all drinking and dancing.
So you walk around there.
And then I'll slide out.
You never know. You may come up with a contact with you.
That's what I'm hoping I connect with people that either didn't know or redo acquaintances. But that's why I'm going. A lot of things like this. Who knows what comes out of it. You don't get out there and get around people. I find that doing a lot of traveling nowadays. I call people on the bus and at the airport. Wherever I go, I start talking to people and make connections. I've met a lot of interesting people. Kind of start the chat with him.
Yeah.
Most people
But that's
will
a very-
talk to you if you started. Most people are not gonna start the conversation. If you come up and say something to them.
Most people are friendly and most people like to talk and share ideas, share their thoughts and stuff. But you'll find a few that just grumpy.
Yeah. That was
That's okay. I'm that way. I smile at everybody, wave at everybody, I say hi to everybody, and yeah, most of them look at you and say, has nothing to do with me, it has to do with them, right?
That's right.
Now, I was up in Minnesota. And I was looking for church. You got back with me after I left to come back home. But I was trying to figure out where to go to worship on Wednesday night, and ended up going to this church. Only went by to a decent person on Wednesday.
Where was that? Remember? Like some of my students.
It was in St. Paul. And it was, I want to say, can you give me a name? Just I remember the name here. I can hear the name, but it was like Springfield or something like that. Nice group, nice group.
That would have been like.
Okay. I stood around the preaching for a while afterwards. He was a very young guy. He was probably 40s, something like that. Had mostly a sing that night when I was there. They was teaching adult class. They just went around and sang a few songs. He was teaching them their songs. Everybody wanted to lead a song for these kind of thing. But anyway, but I thought all very nice people. I enjoyed it. You know, I picked up immediately. The fact that institution, he picked up immediately. The fact that I worked but no, we had a nice visit afterwards. But I didn't know where it was. I got the information now, so I get through him, check on him. But my son just moved to St. Paul.
Oh, really?
I was up there visiting.
The church is not strong in Minnesota. Either conservative or it's just not year round. For a sound system, one from Minneapolis side, it's not Minneapolis, but two Everybody's closer to St. Paul is in Brooklyn, which is to the south and south and east of St. Paul. The group in St. Paul used to be right downtown.
Yeah.
The nice part of town, right down the street from the governor's mansion, right down in St. Paul. It's a smaller building. And got a good price on the property just because it was in a nice part of town. They built the south.
I went by the governor's mansion when I saw this. Went to got a riverboat cruise. Went to the Science Museum, the History Museum, went over to Fort Snelling's. Went to all kinds of places. Went to a lot of different places.
Now you preach it?
Can you imagine the soldiers stayed in that fort in Minnesota winters back before there was good heat? I can't imagine.
Took a tour of St. Paul Cathedral.
I've never been in that building. I should have
It's
been.
pretty impressive. I feel like I'm still like I'm gonna take a temple.
Yeah.
They probably had 150 statues. They probably have 100 stained glass windows.
Becky and I have been able to travel some. We go to your last secret.
Rosedale is where I went.
Roosevelt, yeah. Got Roosevelt.
They're not, they're not.
I don't know that.
Yeah, you are definitely
I
not.
don't know that group well. I know that as far as where I'm expecting with institutional, everything from crazy.
You're not.
Yeah, they didn't strike me as crazy.
I would think so.
For USA, you got the same.
It reminded me a lot of what we did, wasn't that much other than like COVID would have been hearing things. Say, oh, yeah, okay. But yeah, it's I enjoyed St. Paul. I went up to the lake, went to St. Lake Superior, and have a friend that teaches remote classes at St. Scholastica. And so when I was up there, I found St. Scholastica, I took a sign, texted it to him, guess where I am? He said he hadn't been there since 2013, but he's,
We call it the air conditioned city. It's cold, it's on the water, it can be cold. It warms up, it's very nice in the summertime. You get away from the lake, it can be 80s and 90s sometimes. Down on that lake, Becky and I had things up there at times out in the valley, you know, it's 90 degrees during the close to it. Then at night you go down by the lake, you have to have a sweater on. I mean, it's cold down there. You know, the water, the air coming off, the wind coming off that water's never warms up.
I was, we were driving along the shoreline and we passed we're not doing it live. Get you Gooby live. And I said, you know what, I heard that record Edmund Fitzgerald? I said, yeah, that's the name of the lake, Lake Chagoomy, you know. I played the song for them.
Comes from Longfellow's Cove.
Anyway, they were that interested in it, but I played the song for them, and then I just saw it yesterday.
Never heard the song?
I think they've heard of it, but never really paid attention to it. They were that. It's like an 8-minute song. You know,
Oh yeah.
Edmund Fitzgerald.
And I saw
His kids hadn't heard it.
I played it for them. I played it for them on the drive
That's kind of like so when we were in Arkansas,
Those things are so easy.
grew
The
up.
water's fine in there.
Delight, Arkansas, which my dad's hometown.
Where the record Edmund Fitzgerald took place.
So when we went back for family reunion, and my cousin was driving us around the area, you know, showing us sights, and of course, the family interesting points of where my grandparents lived,
You know what
in the cemetery lot. So we went out toward Billstown, where the camp was.
So, you know that.
And there's a little cemetery out there.
Sometimes you just can't throw it away. You probably should.
And just a couple of years after Glenn had died, he had been buried. The grave was still fairly
Given a whole lot
fresh.
of time to prepare for the class.
Didn't have
I wanted to say, you know, I thought I had
Stone
seen
on the ground, yeah.
based on the adult class that I had.
So we pulled up,
I thought I had discovered, like, oh, you're supposed to be back in the village.
This
Yeah, no, I did.
is where Glenn Campbell is there.
I do my Bible. I just couldn't.
I saw a little thing on the news feed yesterday. They're looking for the radio. The radio from the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Oh, yeah.
But I did read
You know, the last that I've done that lake is like an ocean, and it's so deep that the storms come, it's just trouble. If you're
They
not
say it's the
prepared.
largest lake in the world by surface area, and number 3 by volume.
By volume, it's so steep. If you took the other 4 Great Lakes and poured it into Lake Superior, it would not come up.
Sure.
Empty Lake Superior.
that was my favorite class. We'll do something.
Doesn't matter. Whatever.
Oh,
I just started to sign for.
yeah. So I have a lunch appointment with that we take the lot out there. I just
No,
I was
you were telling me how this actually, I was thinking to deal with life or death situation.
on a Monday.
The cross is just the essence of what's said. The cross is kind of suffer with So whether it is for consequences, no actions, just life events, the test is right.
You turn,
So I'm just
turn off.
Mike, I've already worked together.
Doesn't matter now.
I just, I can unplug that.
No, I mean,
Disapproving, or I have to see it feeling some kind of hypocrite.
no. You'll be cutting it out.
I'll cut it out. I started to do that this morning from last night, but I couldn't remember. That's a new step I learned. Forgot it, so I'm gonna go back and figure out how to do it.
As I said, I know I'm gonna pick the song, I just feel like I need to hear
So that's what they're trying to
Both of them respond.
This class is being more conscious.
I don't even know.
Preparation.
I said,
Teaching
I
things for so many years of teaching.
This thing, obviously, I just, I think I set it up. I think it just goes till we're done.
It's not really as good a quality. I mean, for one thing, like they don't have them right there by it.
Especially that bridge.
But just the fact that it's here, I think it's really something.
No one's joined it.
All right, 30 seconds.
I know that I'll tell you good stories, good applications. Sounds like it worked, but actually they worked. And I think all they did is a light skill. I go there and did this. I actually did this.
It is for me.
You know,
Yeah, right.
But he's training your perspective.
Yeah.
You see things differently
yeah,
now,
you do.
which will cause you to do things differently at some point.
Yeah, try it.
It gives you a whole another
No,
viewpoint of.
Douglas, how
Are
you
we just
doing?
getting spewed out facts in 45 minutes? Or are we trying to change a lot? That right there is worth it.
I guess so.
I'm glad to hear it. I get good news to my wife.
He's doing all the techniques. See what I did there?
Well, he always has, but he's only ever told me like one time.
I do.
I think, I mean, I may say more than one time. I think it's
I will do it
spring.
I don't do a lot of stuff because they're us. My classes, they have all classes. It's all question and answer. What did he say there? So, what do you think about that?
Brought it by
What do you read that? What's the next thing? Okay, I just ask questions the entire time. I do very little talking. I mean, just, it's all talk. I mean, they don't know the answers, so I give the answers sometimes, but usually somebody brings up and I try to keep them engaged by just making a question and answer.
Oh, wow.
Not prepared questions, right, reading it, just each thing they say makes me think of it.
They know all about it.
They posted you there.
How effective that is, because then I come back the next week and ask them the same question.
We'll see. Let me try to go on the screen. We're just gonna see what
Okay.
happens.
Thanks. It was more than 10 minutes, but, man, fun visiting, catching up, and I hate to limit that as well. All right, I'm gonna presume that we can do objective 6. Could I, at the end of the class period, which is over now, you can do number 6? List a sequence of preparation steps for teaching an adult or high school class. That doesn't mean you like this sequence. It doesn't mean you always have time to do it. Gary's point, you know, if you're working full time and preaching and a bunch of other stuff. But you could at least list the preparation. I didn't say you had to do it. I said you had to list the steps, right? And if you can't remember, you can read it off the lesson sheet and listen in that way. So we've accomplished that. I'm a claim success. Keep going. The next thing I'd like to talk about is I'd like you to be able to describe at least 3 purposes and the associated properties of so-called handout. You all know what I mean, a handout? It's made from trees. It has a black printing on it. And people get to take them and hold them until they get to their car and throw them away, whatever they do, but still, if they had it in their hand for a short time. Why do we do that? What's it about? That's 7. 8, I would like you to be able to maybe list the characteristics of a take-home assignment sheet. That's one of the 3 types of handouts we'll talk about. Number 9, describe a format That doesn't mean you agree with it or would ever use it in your life, but you could describe one that I might recommend as a template to start with for lesson material. So we'll just talk about that, okay? I've got examples, and I'll try to give you some rationale, and you can probably prove it. Y'all with me on that? That's my commitment for the next few minutes. Talk about it. Why do we hand out paper? Why did I bring all this, we used a lot of toner and paper and all that. What's the point of that? Can you, and you know there's more than one purpose. So there's more. What are reasons that we would hand out something? Yeah, John.
I was gonna say to get people's minds pointed in the direction you wanna go.
Okay, meaning that they would look at the paper. Is that before or after class? What?
But probably beforehand.
Okay, as a preparation, they're already thinking.
Maybe have some questions on there, some
Great.
text to think about.
Might raise questions. It might, good.
Some people from a learning style are tactile learners, so having something physically in their hand is a useful tool.
Yeah.
Writing things instead of typing things on a screen are better for them.
Y'all hear what he's saying is something that happens kind of during the class period. So it's visual. They're seeing it printed, not just hearing the audible. They're writing, which is an additional reinforcement. Ideally, maybe they're even paraphrasing, which is another cognitive process that's going to stick the retention in a little bit better. There's that. Yeah. Good. So it's visual aid. Yeah. Other reasons.
Thinking a little differently from the teacher's perspective, it kind of pushes you to
Organize
and know where you're going.
Yeah,
and
it often-
here's what I'm gonna cover, and
That's right. And thank you for bringing me back to reality here, but yeah, what page are we on? 9 in the book? I shouldn't have told you that because, hopefully. I'm actually following this, but see what he's saying? It's an actual outline, and not just for me as well. If I'm using for an in-class purpose, what else am I doing? I'm telling the class, hey, this is our plan. May not have all the answers on there, but you can tell we're on number 3, and there's actually 17 things we got to get to. You know what I mean? So there's messages there about letting the class help me in getting through the planned activities and that kind of thing. Okay, all good.
Sets expectations too, of the student.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times we have no idea where the teacher's gonna go.
Right.
You don't have some guidance.
Yeah, good. And if you have true disciples that are trying to help you get there, not slow you down, the comments will be, oh, I see you're gonna cover that in a few minutes. Okay, well, I'll hold my comment till then, or something. So there's some efficiency if you got a cooperative. Yeah.
Often like you said, you put the material beforehand, before the class goes. It's online, they can go to it,
Yes.
or whether it's a handout.
Yeah.
You're giving it to them before the class, before they even get to the class, you hope. And there is that pre-preparatory work that you hope they'll do. You hope
Yes.
that they will.
How many times does he use the word hope?
I do have that laid out.
Which implies what?
Hopelessness.
That's right. Ron's just a real half full kind of guy.
He's right now for sure.
Yeah. All right, but you hear what he's saying though? Am I maybe accomplishing some of my learning objectives before they even come into the classroom? Yeah. And I don't know if they did it or not, but there's some things I can do. I can go if it's. I'm amazed the leeway you have with kids because they don't know to object, right? Oh, okay, guys, let me see your lesson sheets. I look at them. Hey, the idea was we handed them out so you'd fill them out, right? I mean, let's imagine an ideal world where the whole family makes a little devotion out of the Bible study, and they come and they've talked about it with their parents, and you know what I mean? And I know here there's some attempt to, what's the word I'm trying to think of, align the adult study with the class, what the kids' classes are studying. It's a perfect setting for a home devotion. I know I'm talking in the ideal here, but you know what I mean by that they come prepared. So a lot of learning has already occurred. You may have a memory verse. You may have something else. I can give a quiz at the beginning of the class period. Are you all noticing how quick quizzes can be done? Right? I mean, I'm not taking them up and grading them, obviously, but it's a quick review. But that's a feedback for me. Did you do the lesson? Did you at least get the points I was trying to prepare you to do? These are great answers. And I'm about to do something which I don't like at all. And that is, we have just done what I call read the teacher's mind exercise. And that is a terrible curse of PowerPoint. Do you know what's about to come up on this screen? what's gonna come up?
What we just were answering.
That's right. And so the challenge was that you get the right answers and the right order, you know what I mean? And I would just tell you, that's why I did that on the board last night. Because if I said, okay, qualifications of teachers, and then I have a blank slide, I'm gonna animate it. What do you guys know is gonna happen? And it just becomes a game that is guess what the teacher has in the order he gets it. I mean, we miss whiteboards. When I saw this, I thought, oh, this is great. I mean, I used to teach math, and that's all I did, you know. Just I write and erase with the other hand, you know, in math. But you see, I can take an answer in any order up here, right? And actually, it's your words for the most part. And so I think it's good feedback. But we've lost that with our pre-program stuff. So anyway, let's see how well you guessed Marty's answers. There was really one whole area that you didn't mention, which I'll get to in a second. Okay, one is that it's pre-class preparation. Now, I want you to stop and think, how many hours do members spend preparing for the class on Sunday morning?
Usually a half an hour. Right
I was going to say hours. I said that on purpose. Not an hour. Not a half an hour. Maybe. And so now we're in the difference in memory. If you have a handout that, you know, you look at it and it's single space and it's 2 pages, how likely is that to be completed? But if it's very simple, or you just do part A, that's all I want you to do, just part A. And make it as easy as I can. I might even put the text on the piece of paper, so you don't even have to get your Bible out and look it up. Plus, it'll be in the version that the questions are from. And only do part A. We're not, B and C we're going to do in class, and that's a different. Y'all see what I'm doing? Start to make it as easy as possible. And anymore, we have folks who say, could you get it on PDF so I can write on my tablet? You know, I don't even want to pull out a piece of paper. And so you could, you know, the online PDF would be, they would be able to do that electronically. Okay. And then, of course, that's what I'm trying to say. Make it compatible. Now, I hope that changes. I think, you know, especially if you have the kids, again, you can be a tyrant in the kids' classes. They don't have a choice, right? But you can say, no, I'm going to look at your lesson. I want to see it done, you know. And you can maybe ooch their skills along so they get the rhythm. Yeah, okay, he is going to look. I need to at least, you know, doodle on the sheet or something, you know, so it looks like I filled it out. So they'll do it. Okay, second is, and you guys mentioned this very well, expedite in-class activities, right? Remember what we did. You were talking about this last night. These answers, you wrote them down, you underlined them, you talked with each other about it. So what I'm doing here is there's a note sheet or there's a quiz or I've handed out a blank timeline about. I want you to trace these things as we talk about it. So now I've got the tactile experience, I've got the visual experience, I've got the translation experience. All of that's helping in comprehension and retention. So there's that. That's right. So, and actually I think this makes the class go a little faster. Now you've got the chart, you can fill it out and so on. And then I think too, that sometimes, you know, especially if it's a complicated group activity, in our side studies especially, I think case studies are very effective. You know what I mean by case study. I'm going to explain it anyway, but you've studied some principles, right? Here are the 7 kind of things that we're trying to learn about spiritual discipline or something. I don't know. But then you have a printout, and the story's already there. It's printed out, and after that, very clear instructions. List 3 pieces of advice you would give this person who's in the case study. In the case study, it would be a story, third-person story. Like a man had 1 sheep, and he loved that sheep, and you know it was like a daughter to him. And yet, but there was a rich man had a guest, and he came and took the sheep. Y'all know that case study in the Bible, and so those are very helpful. And seeing, you can see things so clearly when it's the, you know, the, what is it, the mote in your brother's eye? Man, how clearly can we see that? And that helps us maybe occasionally recognize there's a, you know, 2 before in our own eye. But you see, well, that's a case study. Well, you know, you need to have that already. Print it out well. What are the questions? What's the group? We're going to have a report out at the end. What did your group come up with? Advice, you know, what's the plan? How can you avoid discipline? So there's that. There's one other though, and I find this a lot, and I always feel bad, is that I'm teaching along and I'm all absorbed, and I notice somebody's in the back with their phone up doing this. You know, why are they doing that? Well, I think somehow they might actually, if they're true disciples, they want to look at this again, or show it to their neighbor, or they want to argue with you, and they need the the ammunition to write you up on Facebook or whatever it is that whatever the purpose is, they need a record of what's been done in the class. So, and especially, boy, I think about an ideal class, and it was a little bit like yesterday. What can you work on? Can you imagine an ideal class where you're studying some principle? And let's see, who was showing me their stuff? Oh yeah, it was Rick. He's got a whole thing, and over on the right, he's already suggested some changes. Like, let's list the distractions that keep us from being disciplined soldiers in the fight. That's one of his things he's like to get to. What if you had a class where everyone took 3-4 minutes, wrote that down? Here's something I'm going to eliminate starting tomorrow. I'm going to stop doing this. Or when I first get up, I'm going to do this instead of getting my phone out. Or, some particular change in the life. And you say, okay, I got it. That's good. I want you to talk to the person next to you, and you commit to them. All right. In fact, I'm idealizing. In fact, you guys are going to agree to call each other around lunchtime tomorrow, and you're going to ask, "Did you do that?" Y'all see what I'm getting at? Would we change lives a little bit if we could do that? I mean, that's down at the very bottom, isn't it? I mean, well, not quite. You're not a habit, but you've made a change, and I'm trying to figure out how to make that difference. Did you see? To me, that's an ideal class. You started with some text. Hey, Timothy, right? 60 AD. All the facts that relate to that. Paul's in jail. Timothy's a little bit of a timid guy. He has some bad health problems. He's been told to correct the false teaching. There are enemies all around. There are people that are not listening to him. There are people that don't like him because he's too young. How's he dealing with it? He has discipline in his life, and it's evident to everybody. Y'all see, I'm teaching a lesson kind of in fast time here. I get down and say, what's your commission in your life? What discipline do you need to add? And what are you going to do differently on Monday? And let's talk to each other and commit. And, y'all, can you see that going that whole chain of events? I know it's theoretical and ideal and all that, but either way. Right. So, all right. So there we go. So it could be that I'm taking home a written commitment to make a change in my life, something that I'm going to take after. So I've got before, during, and after. You get the idea for a handout. Now, do you tell the students in advance, this is for in class and this is for assignment and this is for take home? I think you label it. You know what I mean? Big bold letters. Do not try this at home. It's kind of right. This is for the class period. We're going to do this, and it'll be expediting. Right? Y'all get the idea. So, what would a homework sheet look like? And here's an example. And this is a template. You have it in your book in small. This is a different lesson, though. This would be 1 Timothy 2, which y'all remember as men and women. Remember that? That was our chapter summary. But what do you see in this? Just observing that. What would be helpful here as a take-home sheet? Thinking about the average member, whoever that is, in a adult auditorium and adult side study. What do you see there? It's good or bad, or
It's also on page 17 if you want slightly
larger version? Thanks. By the way, this is not an inspired lesson sheet. But I think there's some advantage. You can probably improve on it in a lot of different ways. If you want to look at 17, that's a close-up of that. I believed it. I don't think I even did this. This is from one of our workshops. This is one of the lessons that one of the teachers put together. All right, what do you see? What do you start with at the top?
Objectives.
You're going to tell the students what the objectives are? Yeah, you actually would hope that they are actually going to participate with you in accomplishing it. And in my opinion, they're measuring your performance by whether you got there time-wise and also with the techniques you use. So I'm going to say that kind of helps see, okay, this is a contract. We're going to do that. I think you're hoping to root it. This is for textual study, by the way. I think for topical, it'd be slightly different, but you might still have a little bit of an outline of what you're going to cover in the class. But anyway, here's a reading guide. If you want to read the chapter, which, by the way, notice where's the material, and we put it there, right here. what's the point of having this on the sheet itself? I think I already talked about that some.
You can look at it as you're doing the lesson. You don't have to turn to it.
Yeah. In fact, I don't even have to write the answers in here to these factual questions. I just circle the verse and, make a line. And 2 seconds, I've got that done. And maybe if I'm really short on time, I'll just read all the questions in advance, and then I'll just start reading the text, and when I find an answer, I'll just do that. But what have I done, though, as a teacher for the students? What's the point of the factual questions? Over here.
Just engage the text.
Yeah, that's right. I'm actually saying, I know you can read it quickly, you maybe didn't think about this thought, but there's 2 reasons. If you look closer, you'll see, he says first of all, and then he says second of all, so let's list those. And where are we on the learning sequence here? Yeah, it's this, and maybe here too. You could say, you see a repeated word, or what's the cause and effect relationship you see here? Or what's the precursor, what's the motivation for this? And you're hoping maybe might be some of this right. And then I think at some point you'd like to synthesize this, and you're starting to move toward the applications that you like to make. But I don't think you can go very far in pre-class assignment. And it's interesting, we have some ladies, I say that because I don't know of any men that are like this, but we have some ladies that are so dedicated to coming prepared that if you have a question that has any ambiguity in it, it just disturbs them. And they'll call you or email you and say, what is question 3? Like, I can't come to class unless I've gotten all the right answers in advance. You see what I mean? So there may be a place to say, and some of the lessons you'll see have this, in-class discussion. Not, that's the do not try this at home thing. So, okay, this is all I have to do? Okay, I can do that. Yeah, that's not too long. So I've kind of accommodated their too busy schedule. But then this would maybe be something that I would, cover in class. Or maybe not, it depends. If I'm in a pretty serious, got some serious students, it's a side study. No, I want them to wrestle with some of these questions. And I also might give them some space or air in the question. I might just say, thought question, meaning there may not be a right answer. But I'd like you to wrestle with this before you come to class with some ideas, right? Or what do you think might be, kind of a lot of what's the word? Looseness in the, there's not one answer, but I'm telling you in the question, I'd like you to think about this. You got to decide that as a teacher. How far do you want them to go, right? And then down here, this is just synthesis, kind of looking for principles that you can pull out. And then I start to think about potential applications. So I'm down to, number 4 over there. And this might be done in class, or maybe I want them to think about it before they come, and that will help in our discussion. So these are the points. Is that this is homework or not? I don't know. There's permission to differ here. Do you think this? That's my way of saying you might not agree. You might, but I want you to think about it. So that's that. Sorry. This would be an in-class discussion, and maybe perhaps, and then a discussion of potential applications.
I also see that the one thought analysis question that is effectively a yes or no answer also has the why question.
Okay, right, yeah.
So you can't just say yes or no and move on. You actually force the student to think about it.
I catch myself doing that all the time. I've asked a yes or no question, and I want them to think about it, and implicitly I'm thinking surely they'll have a why behind it. But no, you have to say, yeah, that's good. All right. Here's another example. This would be 2 Timothy 3, which is the chapter after the one we're covering. I just put this in as a reference. I think I have it in the material. I don't even know. But you can see different text, more complicated outline perhaps. The other thing I like to do is, if I have questions on the text, I like to match the questions to the outline. And if I do that, I don't necessarily have to put the verse out here where you'll find the answers. That gives them a little bit more work to find the answer. But so A1 matches that section, A2 matches that section. So it's a little way of saying we're working our way through this outline, and these are the questions you can answer looking at the text over here. And I can tell this is not my lesson because somebody left a whole bunch of space for writing an answer. I have a bad habit of not doing that. I'm going for one page, whatever I have to do. 6.5, I don't know, I'm getting to one page. So, going to waste paper. There's a page. Okay, I think we're getting close to what I want to do this section, but we'll go back and look at the objectives there. How would a class period structure look like for a textual study? We're not doing topical. So I'm going to go back. Y'all believe that having some guys that have never taught before, never made a lesson sheet, it might help them to have a template to work with. Just, okay, try this. You may want to improve on it. That's good. Okay. Whoops. I'm just going to go through this. I'm sorry, this is lecture. Mr. Meadow over here is saying they're getting bored, but I hope these are helpful. This is somewhat flexible, but it kind of raises some of the classroom. I think you need to begin with something that the students do, every single one. What's an example of that? What would be how to start the class with some activity, brain engagement?
Quiz.
Okay, we've used quiz pretty much here, right? I think you could start with that. Maybe a recitation or something. Maybe a very quick group activity. Maybe a question that's a teaser for what you're going to discuss in the lesson. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. I thought about, but my better judgment prevailed, starting this whole workshop with a question, just everybody, talk to your neighbor, what's wrong with our adult classes? You know what I mean? And I'm not looking for a particular answer, but what am I trying to do with that exercise is
Start trouble.
start trouble. And that's what I decided. No, we're gonna get down on such a negative, we'll never recover the mood of the class, after that. But, I mean, the advantage might be, I think we should be critical, not because it's so terrible, but we should be thinking all the time, how can we improve our class? And that might help the class come up with a need statement or something, but something to get everybody involved. Focus attention, review the material from last time, all the things that, get you going. Your brain cells as well as maybe, as I mentioned before, the adrenaline and so on. And I think you want to begin by saying, here's what we're going to do in this class. And that could be presenting the objectives and setting expectations maybe in some way. There's a review. I think in our classes, I have pictures, but I've taken them out for time, but nearly every class period, some of our teachers, not all, will show the goals again. Remember our goals? Fulfill your commission. That's one. Expect evil and respond. Hold to the word. Those are our goals that come right of the themes of the book. Go over that. Maybe a quick review of the book outline. That outline and the quiz could be combined, right? The flashcard exercise. That was what I was doing in Peter. We'd start with that, electronic flashcard thing, and then some background facts. Also, again, the quiz could accomplish that. Then I think if you're studying a text, I think you want to zoom out a little. Remember, this is chapter 2. And within chapter 2, you can see there's a division here, the outline, talk about that. Talk about how it's related, where the transition words, kind of top level structure. And then I think you want to subdivide the class period into these time blocks. And we're going to try to get through 1 through 4 in the first 15 minutes, and then 10 minutes on the next 3 verses. We're skipping the hymn because I don't understand it. And then we're going to go to the last part in this chapter. Then I think, and here's a point that probably deserves some discussion. Maybe there's some disagreement. This is Marty, incompetent Marty. I start out with the outline, and I cover the facts, and I talk about relationships. I start drawing principles, right? I start thinking, what are some potential applications, right, in this, right? And we get about right there, about halfway through, incomplete discussion, and the bell rings, right? And what's the most important part of the class again, kind of?
Change.
I'm trying to change lives, right? But what have I done? I've smashed it into the last minute or two, in which everybody's gathering their books up, or, you know what I mean? They're folding up. And in fact, the preschool parents, they're gone. I mean, they're out, going collecting kids. You see what I mean? So an alternative maybe is to maybe intersperse the analysis question. So you cover 3 or 4 verses, a block of text, and then try to push that onto an application if there's one there. So what you're doing is you're having, yes, Tim,
I was just saying, I think we have to think differently from preaching.
thank you.
Because when we preach, we do want to, we want to have that big aha
I'm
right
getting
at
to
the
the
end.
punchline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this, we have to think differently.
That's right.
It's different use of time.
Right. And you could almost imagine, okay, I did not get to the last block of text and I'm out and I didn't get to that application. But okay, we got 3 of them done out of the 4. And maybe at about, 10 after, and I only have maybe 10 more minutes, I skip the 3rd one, go to the 4th one if that's the one I really care about. But at least I've got an organization that has some degree of, what am I trying to say, flexibility or, where I can get. But that's my big mistake, is I get to the punchline. And I'm mostly used to teaching one after another, so I'll say, we'll talk about this next time. But I think I've missed the opportunity. It was teed up, right? It was all there. Now I've got to go review all that and get back to that point and say, how are you going to improve your prayer life? Or how are you going to, fulfill your duty as a parent more fully or something, you know what I mean? It's kind of anyway, okay. And so then I think you get the application conclusions and again, in the ideal, you maybe let them talk to each other or maybe out loud say, here's what I'm going to do, maybe make some near-term changes. It's an ideal structure. So you're starting with getting attention, getting the factual learning, some analysis and so on, and then you get to the applications. And maybe this is like a set of 2 or 3 cycles down here at the bottom. All right? Advice. That's just advice. This is not necessarily inspired. So we've done that. Okay. You need a break? One last, I think I have, let's see if we've done these objectives here. Can you describe 3 purposes